Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we're going to talk today about when a loved one dies, how you build mental strength. And we're going to have somebody on this show who has really been through it and is being tested constantly, I would say, Heidi. And she can talk to us about how you deal with loss in your life when you don't feel like you're going to make it. So, Heidi, would you like to introduce her?
Sure, I'd love to, Mom. And like you said, she not only talks the talk, she walks the walk, and we're going to find out how she found hope despite many, many losses. Her name is Dr. Cristi Bundukamara. We are going to call her Dr. B because that's what she goes by, and I love that. Unfortunately, Dr. B lost 3 of her 7 children and her husband. Her husband and 2 of her children died from a neurodegenerative disease, and she had a son that died in a drowning accident. Dr. B is author of the book, Pain and Purpose, My Journey to Mental Strength, and her award-winning documentary film is titled Strength in Vulnerability. And I watched it last night, and I would highly recommend it. It's a wonderful, wonderful documentary. Dr. B created the Mentally Strong Academy, a full-service educational platform. Welcome, Dr. B.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here and to be with other women who are, doing the work and being strong in the grief. So thank you.
Well, it's pretty amazing following your story. And I was listening to your book last night. You're so generative. I mean, it's incredible what you're putting out there for the world. Not only do you have great information on the site, but your ability to tell your story and to be open enough to share it. How did you get to that?
By trade, obviously trained in psychiatry and psychology, losing my first child in a drowning accident. I did what I think a lot of people do when they're raising their kids, just focus on the other kids. I didn't really, take the time to grieve. And so that became cumulative. And then my son got sick, and I am that nurse that is going to save my son, right? And I did everything to try to save him. And so 10 years of medical trauma on top of that grief that I never actually felt. So when Reggie passed away in 2016 from this degenerative condition, I knew that I had to figure out the how, right? This, grief story that we tell people that it's this, 5 stages and then you're done and you accept. And I'm just like, losing a child, the word acceptance is a trigger word in itself, right? And so I knew I had to really work through that and figure out the how for myself, but also for other people.
Your son drowned, and then
What year did your son drown? So we have some context.
That was 2005.
2005, and then your son died how many years later, your other son?
Almost 10 years later. So
Almost 10
that
years
was
later.
in 2016, so 11 years later, but 10 years of medical trauma, right? And my daughter was diagnosed with the same condition and my husband, but they were not sick most of that time. My daughter did have seizures, but they were well controlled. The same disorder, but presentation was completely different. My daughter, I thought, okay, if it's anything like my son, when she does get sick, I'll have about 10 years with her, in this degenerative condition. In 2021, she died in her sleep, just woke up and she was dead.
She was just a lovely, healthy looking gal.
Oh my gosh. Beautiful, beautiful girl, beautiful heart, beautiful soul. Engaging in life, loving people. And yeah, that was the hardest, and I know that some people are like, well, feel like, losing my husband should have been the hardest, or my first son, but honestly, I've experienced every type of grief, right? The sudden grief of an accident, like drowning, a chronic disease, 10 years of fighting for your child. But then with my husband, we didn't really fight. He wanted to get on hospice and just naturally pass, right? But then my daughter, it was just so sudden and unexpected, and it just ripped my heart, right? So I talk about when Johnny passed, I did what I think every mother of young children does in a tragedy. You just focus on being a good mother, and you don't have time to grieve. And then I began my strong grief journey after Reggie passed, and really understanding what I teach now in the Mentally Strong Method is that grief gets enmeshed with everything else in your life. And we we don't want to feel that pain because we're also talking negatively to ourselves. There's a lot of injustices, anxiety, and all of that gets enmeshed, and past trauma gets enmeshed in how we're showing up in our grief. And what I teach is that you have to separate all of those pieces so that you can process them differently. And
That makes sense because Dr. B, I imagine that at times you didn't even know who you were grieving for because you had so many losses.
right, and it's cumulative, and the pain is different, and then there's guilt
Hmm.
because the pain is different. Like, you have all of these different emotions. Seeing me grieve in the documentary is after
Hmm.
Maya's passing, right?
Hmm.
And so, and at the end of the documentary, my husband was alive during that period of time.
I noticed that. And at the end,
Yeah.
you had
And
some
then he
notes
passed.
saying that he had died.
It was 45 days between Reggie's death and your daughter's death, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so talk about your 45 days because it's so clear on your site what you did, each
Hmm.
day and
It
what
is.
people can
Yeah.
do.
I tell people I wanted to call the documentary Confronting Grief, but the marketing people said that was a little too harsh because it's exactly what it was. And the 45 days is personal to me. So it's not, some magic formula of 45 days, but it was our family number. It was my husband's football number. We wore it on a gold chain, like you do when you're, a football coach's wife, right? And to realize that there was exactly 45 days between their death, I knew it was a sacred time for me. So the days aren't as important as the time frame of confronting the grief and working through all of the pieces of the grief, because it's not just grief. Grief is something that everyone will experience. What I've experienced, and Gloria, you've experienced, is traumatic grief, right? Losing a child, losing a spouse. Grief is a sacred thing. I will feel the pain of the loss of my children forever. So you do these things in a process, right? But it will still be painful that my children are not here for that holiday.
I find though that you don't stay in the pain as long. As
Yes.
time goes on, you recover quicker.
Yes. I say, like, the intensity and frequency in which you have to feel the pain does decrease over time. But, that old saying, time heals all wounds. If you're just thinking time in and of itself is going to heal it,
Hmm.
not likely, right?
Yeah.
You're a nurse. If you don't take care of a wound and clean it and nurse it, it's not going to get better on its own, especially if it's a deep, ugly wound, right? Like, sometimes we have to actually do wound care, and we have to do all of these things to treat that wound. Minor wounds will heal on their own, but major wounds need some care.
Now, talk a little bit about some of the things you do. Like there's one where you put Post-its on a punching bag.
Hmm. I loved
Yeah,
watching that in the film
yeah.
because you could
So,
just see you getting out all the aggression and
right.
feelings and, everything that you were dealing with.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Freud, but one thing he was right about is that anger turned inward is depression, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, when you're dealing with this kind of pain and grief, and you're angry at God, you're angry at, the disease process, you're angry at yourself for not doing something to save them, right? If you don't get rid of that anger, if you don't have some way to release it, it will likely turn inward and contribute to the depression that you are feeling. And you can get into kind of those clinical states of depression. And so, super important to identify anger and release anger. And it just, it gives you something to do, like a physical manifestation of what you are trying to do, right? You're trying to let go, release
Yeah.
this anger. And you do have to have that intention and but the process of doing something physical, the burning, the punching, brings it to life and allows
Hmm.
you to release some of that.
Maybe I only want to do a 10-day release or something. Then
Mhm.
I would figure out, well, one day I'm going to write something, one day I'm going to burn something, one day I'm going to walk, or one day I'm going to run, or one day
Yeah.
swim, or whatever.
So you want to learn to release and receive, right? How
Hmm.
are we filling our cup? So some of the things that I did to fill my cup is I went back to the house where we raised my children, and I swam with the dolphins that my
I love
children
that.
had swam with, and I did like fun things. Yes, I cried and it was hard, but it was also beautiful, right? So you want to have kind of that balance. And when you think about trauma, and some people want to maybe use the word injury or, don't want to necessarily identify it as trauma, but grief is a pain like a badge of honor. You are allowed to wear it. But the trauma, if you don't release the trauma, it will come out in negative ways in your body, whether you will
Hmm.
start experience clinical depression, anxiety, mood problems, even physical manifestations, right? Like we now know that many of our physical conditions, especially autoimmune diseases and things like that, are from the chronic stress and holding on to trauma.
I've heard the release and the
Hmm.
letting go and the purging, but I haven't heard filling the cup back up.
Yeah.
That part makes like I haven't heard of that. And watching you do both, the balance of visiting your house, swimming with the dolphins, going to where your children were when they were
Hmm.
alive. I
Yeah.
haven't heard that other part.
Yeah.
It's just been a year and a half since you lost Bundy, and I wondered what's the difference between that and a child?
Yeah. He went downhill pretty quickly after Maya passed 4 years ago. He didn't want to fight, right? He didn't want to take his medicine. He didn't want to
Hmm.
eat right. He's like, I'm dying anyway. I want to eat, chocolate cake and Doritos, right? And that's his right. And so that it was a very different 3 years. Like we were able to grieve together, and you could see in the documentary we saw a medium together, and that was a very healing process. Like our children came through and we were talking about, I'm getting choked up, him going to be able to be with the children,
Hmm.
and knowing that I had a purpose of in this story moving forward.
And that he still had work to do on the other side,
Yeah.
which gave
Yeah.
meaning as
Right.
he was getting more sick.
I always wonder how people feel where they carry the genetic.
Yeah. Oh,
And,
a lot. He
Mm-hmm.
really, really struggled with that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for him as a uh, like a solid man of God character. Like everything about him was to try to do the right thing, and he carried a lot of guilt around, being the person that had this genetic. I mean, he knew there was nothing he could do about it, but it did weigh very, very heavy on him.
my husband was ill for a while, and it can be frustrating for the
Mhm.
wife if they won't do everything that you, as nurses, that you think they should be doing in order.
Yeah, when your husband doesn't listen to you. Yeah.
That must have been somewhat frustrating for you.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think it really was a little different in our situation because I made my son go on every diet, ketogenic diet, like, and it didn't help. And so I think I did accept that he was not going to fight it because I knew we really couldn't win. So we might as well just enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
the time that we have. And, I thought because we had been grieving for 3 years that, you know, most of my grief was kind of contained. And at about the 1 year mark, 1 year after his death, it hit me pretty hard. and so like still getting choked up right now, talking about him and things, and just how unfair
Hmm.
life was for him, and he didn't deserve that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about your site because it's
Hmm.
phenomenal. And I wanted to talk about um, you're offering an actual workshop, you might want to call it, on
Hmm.
free on your site. And
Hmm.
it's a beautiful thing. I signed up and went into one of the first things you're doing, cognitive therapy. You've got tapes and it's fabulous. And
Hmm.
it's free. And you also sent me your book. It's a result free. It's
Good.
get downloaded. And
Hmm.
well, we'll have to say
Yeah.
quickly that if you've got anybody, you're thinking about foster care, just the beginning of it will be in education. So because you
Yeah. Because we didn't mention that, right? Five of my
Mhm.
children are adopted, two biological. Obviously, the two that passed of the disease were biological. The one that died in the drowning accident was one of my adopted children. And just the pain that the whole family has gone through and the stress of taking on foster kids is part of my story as well.
My sister and I have adopted daughters, and I
Okay.
always say they were born of our hearts. So our kids come
Hmm.
to us in many ways, and your family is definitely an example of that.
Hmm.
You do have a video on your site about ketamine.
Hmm.
And I was curious, for those who don't know, well, do you want to mention what ketamine is?
Yeah, so I'm also a practicing psychiatric nurse practitioner and have a clinic. So ketamine is used for the treatment of refractory depression. But I can tell you that it can also be a one-time experience to try to push through. I know many people listening are trying to do the work and they feel maybe stuck and they're like, I just can't. I think that's a word that comes up a lot for people. I just can't. And ketamine can take that process. And I do it in a 4 hour intensive where you come in, I help identify, okay, this is the grief, this is the trauma, this is anxiety, this is negative self-talk. This is maybe a spiritual conflict between you and your God, right? And we organize that and then we can go into a ketamine session where wherever that stuck piece is, it can be released. Well, three things happen in a ketamine. There is a biochemical antidepressant release. Like it's a true antidepressant, and it's pretty aggressive and acute. It brings people out of suicidality, and so there's a chemical thing that happens, and then there is a psychological thing that happens. So the the story, the negative narrative that you've been telling yourself, the more you tell yourself that, the stronger that pathway is, right? So if I were to be saying, it was my fault that my son died, it was my fault, it was my fault, it was my fault. And you can intellectually know that you need to counteract that, right? And you try, but you're constantly doing this battle back and forth. Ketamine can reprogram that loop in one session,
Mhm.
right? It can help you reprogram that loop. And then it also has a spiritual component of like opening up the, spiritual portal to, have some healing in that. And I know clinically and professionally, we kind of put spirituality on a, here, go talk to your pastor or go, you know, but the reality is in grief, we do need to acknowledge and work through what we believe happens after death, right? And I'm not here to say what happens, but I'm here to encourage people wherever they are in their belief system to work that out with their grief. And it's worked out separately. So ketamine can be a very powerful tool in the grieving process.
Mhm. Well, I would also say people do need to be with a professional like you who knows what
Mm-hmm.
they're doing. Because it is, it can be a difficult drug because it can cause psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
People, particularly people who are taking it recreationally and over.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's typically on the streets. It's definitely mixed with something else for sure.
So, well,
Yeah,
tell us how to get a hold of you and everything you're doing and your book and
yeah. Mentallystrong.com is the best portal. You just go straight to the main website. You can look around there, but at the very top is a link to the documentary, and the documentary is free on YouTube. If you get to a place on the site that asks for your email address, give it to us. We want to, give you resources. We have the digital version of the book, but I encourage people to listen to the audiobook of the book because it is in a podcast form. There is another person who's reading it, and then she stops and asks me questions along the
I
way.
love this.
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
Yeah. And we have workbooks and, lots of things, online courses, intensives that you can come to Colorado for, many workshops, just a lot going on, but just start at mentallystrong.com.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. B, for being on. You're amazing. And please take care of yourself also in this process.
Yeah.
You're still early on in that. In my
Yeah.
world, 4 years for your daughter is also early on.
Yes.
Mhm.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so take care.
I will.
Swim with some more dolphins.
I think I might want to do that. Yes.
Definitely. Thank you, Dr. B, for being a great example of how we can find hope after loss. And I love the 45-day challenge you did in the documentary. It has so many amazing ways that we can find hope after loss and things that we can do proactively when we do not know how we're going to survive. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Heidi, I want to thank everybody for being on this show today. And we always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.